Sigurd stomped away from the two young watchers over the pass, kicking up clouds of loose powder that were snatched away by the howling wind. The grim frown under the frost giant's ice-caked beard marred his features more than any of his scars. It was not their fault, but the brief exchange had soured him. No, it reminded him of something he had long been dissatisfied over. After returning from the dwarven passes, he reported his findings to Jarl Eric Frostreaver. It was all he could stand, just answering their questions as the council of clan elders deliberated. He was dismissed, long past the point of his being sick of standing around, so that they could deliberate further and consult with the other clans, presumably so they could deliberate some more. He didn't have to wait for longer than a week. He was not the only one sent to see what was going on above the dwarf kingdom, and those representatives had far less of a distance to travel. Any reply from the other clans would most likely be immediate, as they should have received their own reports days in advance of his arrival at Frostreaver Citadel. The response should be obvious, or so he felt, but his sarcastic reply to the young warrior at the southern pass was about as close to reality as he was willing to openly admit. Disgusted by the tepid reaction displayed by the Jarl and his council to his report, he left to make his rounds, hoping that familiar routines would put him in the right mind again. Reminders only followed him, however, as he trekked over their greatly diminished holdings. Sten was right about one thing: the Frostreaver clan should hold the greatest place of honor for their deeds. Instead, they had been cast down and shunned. Now, they were considered nothing more than a small clan on the southern fringe of Frost Giant lands. He stopped to gaze down at the pass, sighing wistfully over the past. Though he received the reaction that he did from the youths of the clan, they probably didn't even know the half of it. Their kind was forged from ages of conflict, far beyond the climactic confrontation with the demon gods. Their mighty ancestors, legends of measure beyond the reckoning of those who lived today, warred in frozen climes the world round. Time and again they stood tall against all who came until the ruinous powers of the south set the world aflame and cast down the great powers of old. None of the present day wanted to hear those stories, however. Sigurd's lips pulled back in a sneer as he turned and continued on his way. No one wanted to hear those stories, but they should. Sigurd loved the ancient sagas, those legends of mighty deeds that challenged all who heard them to strive for those very same heights of glory. The stories that taught them how to live and how to die, that drove him to become one of the greatest warriors of his time. Yet many others did not share that same appreciation. It reminded them of what they could never be and never achieve, the specter of untouchable glories past. Better to compare themselves to something more reasonable, they thought, as if setting limits for themselves would prepare them for the next time tumultuous events came their way. And come they would, Sigurd firmly believed. Every century or two, the winds of change and chaos came, and it was now 2 centuries since the coming of the demon gods. He looked up, past the clouds to the azure skies beyond. The frost dragons were the first hint that something was happening, for the true harbingers always came from the south. Would they be able to meet the next challenge to their strength? It was a needless line of thought, for the unsettling idea that they were almost certainly not had already entrenched itself in his mind. Their blood had thinned, strength and bravery supplanted by weakness, passive thinking and deliberations. He knew the arguments, presented time and again. They needed to be cautious, to preserve and grow their strength. Sigurd, however, disagreed. The frost giants could not sit idly by as the ages withered them away. They needed to fight, needed the strife of war and mighty deeds to surpass the legends of old. That was what made them strong, not the endless idling that turned them into shallow husks of their former strength, unfit to enter the glorious halls of their ancestors. All they were doing in their current state was passing on weakness. Through fields of ice and sudden storms, Sigurd walked on, stepping over crevasse and stream. Over day and night he skirted the southern borders of their territory, contemplating the future as he looked on past the borders, to the emptied ruins overlooking glacier and vale. 2 other clans once existed in the south, 2 of the 9 that made up the frost giant population of the Azalizia range. The 3 clans in the south, the Frostreavers being the third, banded together to meet the demon gods in the southern pass, yet their strength failed. The devastation had been so great that they were forced to consolidate their numbers and, with the southern clans no longer presenting any challenge to them, the demon gods moved on to invade the dwarf kingdom. The worst part of it was that the demon gods appeared to care more for the dwarves than they, bypassing their remaining strongholds in favor of an uninterrupted route to Fiobukana. It was an event that brought great shame upon the survivors. to suffer trespass, unable to bring down the foes who tread freely through their lands. The clans to the north believed little of their account. Why would such a mighty enemy simply fight them and leave? Distasteful rumors grew, transforming into truth in the ears of many. In the aftermath of the invasion, the dwarven capital lay in ruins, and their kingdom fell into decline. The frost dragons, who had flown away over the northern seas to avoid the demon gods, returned all at once and demolished the frost giants' northern fleets and coastal settlements along the way. For the next 2 centuries, a period of relative silence fell over the Azalisia Mountains, marked by the quiet stalemate between the frost giants and the frost dragons. The latter part was slowly being remedied, but, then, changes came once more. Slow and methodical planning was no match for decisive action and overwhelming power. It was as if their long-cultivated victory was snatched away to remind them of this, though he felt that very few saw it that way. When he finally tired of brooding over the southern border, he turned back. The days that had passed should have been enough to send word back and forth to the central clans. Scaling the great glaciers that flowed from the southern ice fields, he made his way north, circling a towering massif that jutted from the ice. A third of the way up the massive peak, Frost-Reaver Citadel loomed, perpetually hidden from the light of the sun. It had the look of having been grown from the cliff face, wrought from enchanted stone and ice drawn forth by the mystical might of their ancestors, shaped into an existence that stood for centuries. Its outer walls were melded with the mountain itself, spanning most of its northern base. Stairs and spires of blue-grey ice twisted and rose, appearing and disappearing into the stone hundreds of meters above. Sigurd strode up the ramp to the main gate, a cavernous maw over 3 times his height. He entered into the main corridor, the sound of his boots echoing up and down its length until he arrived at a door crafted entirely of shimmering black ice. 2 blackguards in dull midnight plate stood on either side, hands rested upon the pommels of their frost reavers, massive great axes forged from enchanted ice, nearly identical to Sigurd's own. They nodded grimly at his approach but did not voice any welcome. "Housecarl," he spoke to the blackguard on his right, "are those old wretches in?" "When aren't they?" he replied with a smirk and jerked his head. "They're expecting you." Sigurd grunted in response and placed his hands on the doors to the great hall. Jarl Eric Frost-Reaver and his council turned their heads as he threw them open, walls of enchanted ice shuddering in the wake of his entry. The old ruler was seated on a throne covered in the furs of ancient and mighty beasts, and he looked down at him from the head of the hall. His council, seated at a long table between the throne and the door, glared sourly at his brash entrance. Sigurd ignored their unwelcoming expressions, striding forward to stand in the icy blue glow that permeated the chamber. "What has been decided, my Jarl?" Sigurd asked. "The clans are divided," Jarl Frost-Reaver answered. "Literally. 4 lie north of the Dwarven Highway, 3 south, including us. What sort of response are you expecting in this situation?" "A proper one," Sigurd told him. "These newcomers bare their teeth at us, so we should provide them a welcome befitting those who would challenge us on our land." The Jarl exchanged looks with the men at the table. They were all old, well past 200 years of age. A bearded elder with a scar that ran across his face drummed his fingers on the table. "Did you yourself not give the report of their strength?" he asked, "or was it a fanciful exaggeration?" "It wasn't, Halstein," Sigurd answered. "Each one of those undead soldiers standing along the road was roughly as strong as an acclaimed veteran warrior." "Yet you expect us to hurl our strength at so many," Halstein told him. "It wouldn't even be our own warriors, for the most part." "Why does it matter?" Sigurd clenched a fist at his side. "Unless they plan on doing nothing at all." "It matters because the other clans do not consider us in the same manner as their own." Jarl Frost-Reaver's voice rumbled over the table. "We are weak and shamed in their eyes, and our numbers weigh poorly on the scales of strength." "This again," Sigurd said. "How long must this farce go on for? To dishonor the clans of the south is to dishonor themselves. By Thrym, we fought while they did nothing." His voice boomed across the chamber, but the Jarl snorted in the face of Sigurd's ire. Sten was not the only one who shared this opinion in the Frost-Reaver clan. Most of the younger generations did. It had become a sort of common gripe that had lost most of its effect over the years, even when voiced by a champion of the clan. Even Sigurd himself felt that, with the accompanying inaction, it smacked of whining. "The difference between us only grows wider," Jarl Frost-Reaver stated, "and they will press their advantage for as long as it suits them. Then perhaps it's time to cut them down to size," Sigurd spat. They won't be so proud once we tear their strongholds down around their ears. We'll do nothing of the sort, the Jarl told him. The clans have agreed that something must be done, and are even now making preparations. What was the point of this entire discussion, then? Sigurd scowled. Why would you make it sound as if nothing was being done? Halstein stirred from his pile of furs, eyeing Sigurd pointedly. A demonstration, he said. A test to determine whether you could be sent or not. And? Jarl Frostreaver looked round to his counselors, who each shook their heads in turn. We cannot, he said. You're too strong. Too strong? Sigurd's face twisted into confusion. What kind of? Too strong, the Jarl cut him off sternly. Too impulsive, and too charismatic. The clans have decided that, given the strength of our adversary, we should conduct warfare using a more strategic approach. Your presence will almost certainly disrupt order as you draw brash young warriors into your camp. Gunnar will be sent to lead our warriors instead. Gunnar. You believe this to be a poor choice? Sigurd and the Jarl's son had very different views on how to carry out their battles, but he was no weak fool. If he was entrusted with the command of some of their forces, he might just be able to put an end to the other clans' delusional stance against the southern tribes. No, Jarl, Sigurd replied. If war is to be waged in the fashion you suggest, then Gunnar is the obvious choice. Good, Jarl Frostreaver grunted. I'm sure that Gunnar will be delighted that you approve. The council turned their attention away from him, seemingly satisfied that his audience had concluded. Sigurd, however, remained standing where he was. What about the other part of my report? Other part? The Jarl frowned for a moment. You mean your warning about frost dragons flying south? Sigurd inclined his head slightly. Do you truly believe it means what I believe you're implying? The Jarl asked. Eric Frostreaver's long frown was mirrored by those in his council. They had all been children at the time of the demon god's invasion. Sigurd trembled from the effort of keeping himself from smashing the table before him. There it was, more plainly than he had ever seen, the spectre of the past that prevented their kind from claiming the future, consigning them to the stagnant spiral of decay. The South stirred, offering them the chance to redeem themselves from the failure of the past. Yet what was their response? Hesitation. Weakness. Fear. He brushed aside his anger. He would do what needed to be done, regardless of the Jarl and his cowering council. I do, Sigurd said. Many pay no heed to the old sagas, but I find this timing just a bit too uncanny. And if it is, what do you think we can do about it in our condition? We will do what we must, Sigurd told him. I know that if we do not ready ourselves at all, the outcome will be far worse. Fine, the Jarl blew out a long sigh. You may make your preparations. Just don't get ahead of yourselves. I hear you, Jarl. Sigurd turned on his heel, striding out towards the entrance of the great hall. As he placed his hand on the door, the voice of the Jarl came over his shoulder. I don't know how you can cling to this hope of yours. His tired voice betrayed the long passage of years. Hope? Nay, Sigurd pulled open the door and looked back over his shoulder at the council. Glory. Gods, demons, dragons, come what may, we will be chosen to take our place in the halls of the slain. Elishnish, Elishnish. Elishnish wobbled slightly as she glided over the great forest of Tob, startled into alertness by Hedgenmil. She blinked slowly, then released a despondent sigh. Hedgenmil eyed her worriedly from the side. Are you all right, sister? He asked. Elishnish sighed again. She wasn't all right, she was an absolute wreck. The last 7 days had steadily piled her mind high with worries for the future, about whether Lady Schultier would give her a favorable reply, or if she would be fed to adventurers. She spared no thought to her newly discovered dancer class, nor did she express any interest in anything else. The days passed, and the world turned, uncaring of her plight. She was just a tiny thing of little consequence, no one cared, and she would not be missed. Ilisn apostrophe ish equals Verilyn. Her right eye turned back to glance at Hedgenmil. What's wrong, sister? He asked, voice laced with concern. You're a good brother, Hedgenmil. What? If something happens to me, she swallowed painfully, you can have my stuff. I never disliked you, brother. Various expressions crossed over Hedgenmil's features, finally settling into a worried look. He truly was a good brother. Hegenmul didn't complain too much and always listened to her. He would never rise to oppose her and was also useful in various ways. Someone would probably take her stuff from him shortly after, but that was just the way the world worked. "Is something going to happen to you?" he asked. If it's really bad, maybe I could talk to Lady Aura." "You would talk to her?" She looked back at him again. "For me?" Yes, if it's that serious," Hegenmul answered. "It's not really that big of a deal. Pets can communicate telepathically with their masters." Elishnish went over what she knew of Lady Aura. Supposedly, she and Lady Shiltia were the Sorcerer King's attendants at the time that her family was subjugated and flown away. Did that mean they had comparable power? Lady Shiltia also referred to Lady Aura in less than formal terms. Would becoming Lady Aura's pet save me?" "Save you? I haven't any clue what's going on, sister. Why would you need saving, of all people?" "Adventurers." "Adventurers?" Hegenmul looked around nervously, and he lowered his voice. "You got in trouble with adventurers? Just what have you been doing in the last few weeks?" "I was trying to cultivate some strength by studying how to become a dancer, but then I got caught up in some scheme and was sent to the Adventurer Guild. I don't even know what I did wrong." Her stomach twisted uncomfortably, inflicting her with a sensation she had never experienced before. She was barely a century old. Alarming signs of her deteriorating health were becoming more frequent. "That doesn't make any sense," Hegenmul frowned. "You're one of the most valuable dragons in the transportation network. Why would Lady Shiltia send you to the Adventurer Guild?" "It wasn't Lady Shiltia," Elishnish told him. "It was some woman named Swear. She walked in on my training, and 5 minutes later I was consigned to the Adventurer Guild. I was so shocked I couldn't even say anything." "That's horrible, sister," Hegenmul said. "Did you ask Lady Shiltia about it? She's the one in charge of the Enclave, except for me, of course." "I did," Elishnish said. "I begged and I pleaded and all I got from her was 'I'm thinking about it.'" "I can't imagine that she would agree," Hegenmul told her. "Lady Aura says that she's just a bit of a sadistic predator, but Lady Shiltia does put a lot of consideration into our work, and she doesn't treat her subordinates unfairly." "Really? Really? Thank you, Big Brother. Be Big Brother." She clung to the thread of hope offered by Hegenmul, and a half-hour later, they arrived over Ranthal. Circling twice as they descended to the wall, she nearly missed her landing. Something was happening to the pens and it was noticeably different from what was in her memories. They waited near the front desk for the vampire brides to come and unload their cargo. Only 2 came out to do so, while the third was busy dealing with a queue of customers. Elishnish tried to pick up her spirits again by looking around at the changes to the city. The market in the demi-human quarter had been moved over to the terrace just off from the main street, and appeared to be taking on many of the features familiar to the plazas throughout the city. Several humans could even be seen browsing through the stands in the morning gloom. The hoardings and buttresses that supported the frost dragon pens were covered in scaffolding. Several dwarves could be seen working around and inside the building. "What's going on here?" she asked the vampire bride working to remove her infinite haversacks. "Renovations," the vampire bride furrowed her brow as she worked on a particularly stubborn buckle. "Lady Shiltia has ordered the space to be reorganized and expanded a bit, based on the data we've collected so far. New post offices are being built across the network, including those for Ranthal." Elishnish looked out at the tools and materials sorted into piles on the wall. Hegenmul, freed of his burdens, slowly made his way in, looking around at the work being done. After the vampire bride was done unfastening all of her bags, Elishnish followed after him. Halfway through the partially torn down pens, they found Lady Shiltia frowning down at a huge roll of parchment unfurled over a table. She raised her head at their approach. If everything is being torn apart," Hegenmul said, "where do we stay?" "The one room at the end is untouched for the time being," Lady Shiltia told him. Elishnish opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her tail twitched anxiously as she hesitated over learning of her fate. "What are you squirming over?" Lady Shiltia did not miss her discomfort. Lady Shiltia," Elishnish forced the words out of her mouth, "about what we discussed last week." "Ah, yes," Lady Shiltia said. "After some thought, I've decided to take advantage of Sabos' momentum. You will go to the Adventurer Guild." Elishnish's thoughts froze, and the world turned bleak and desolate. Her vision blurred, and great tears fell from her eyes to land upon the stones. "Sister?" Hejinmal said in alarm. "You way." Ilishnish sobbed, hiding her face in her claws. Her body heaved and her wings drooped. A sorrowful wail rose and echoed through the corridor. Several dwarves looked up from their work, and the customers at the front desk leaned over to see what was going on. Hey, what's all this now?" Lady Shultir stole furtive glances at the bystanders. Ilishnish continued to cry, the pool of frozen tears growing wider at her feet. "It's because you're sending her to the adventurers," Hejinmal said. "What did she do wrong? There must be some way she can make up for this." "What in the world are you two going on about?" "They're adventurers, Lady Shultir," Hejinmal explained. "They kill people like us, right? This is a tragedy. She's going to be turned into boots before laying her first clutch. Lady Yora even said that you wouldn't do this to your subordinates." Ilishnish wailed even louder. Everyone along the wall had stopped by this point to gaze upon the spectacle of a weeping frost dragon. "Huh? Just walk quiet, you." "I can't, my lady," Ilishnish sniffed. "I don't want to dee. You," Lady Shultir told Hejinmal, "contact Tora and tell her to have Mare waiting at the Adventurer Guild. He'll be able to explain things better." What was the point of that? She didn't need an explanation about how she would be slaughtered and turned into expensive equipment. Ilishnish continued to weep, body racked with sobs. Lady Shultir floated up and alighted on her nose. Ilishnish's head was suddenly forced down to the floor, and her jaws closed around her cries. Her cross-eyed gaze centered on Lady Shultir. "You're crying for absolutely no reason, you ridiculous lizard," Lady Shultir told her. "Mare will be waiting, all you need to do is listen to what he says." Lady Shultir stepped off of Ilishnish's nose, looking down at her as she sniffled daintily. "Do you know where the Adventurer Guild is?" Ilishnish gave a shaky nod of her head before turning around and shuffling away. "Wait, what are you doing?" Lady Shultir's voice stopped her after a few steps. "Going to the Adventurer Guild?" Ilishnish replied. "Not like that, you aren't," Lady Shultir told her. "You'll be going as a human." "A human?" "Yes, the same as last time. What do you think will happen if a dragon just walks into the Adventurer Guild unannounced?" Lady Shultir had a point. They'd probably slaughter her on the spot. She wouldn't even have a chance to persuade them to spare her. Actually, humans couldn't even tell she was a dragon, so maybe she still had a chance? Ilishnish walked to the back end of the hoardings. "Sister, what?" "Move over, Hejinmal, I have to change." "Change?" "Don't look." Ilishnish appeared in the corridor once again, stepping out before Lady Shultir. The vampire ran a critical eye over her. "You're not wearing that plain old training uniform to the Adventurer Guild, are you?" Is there something wrong with it?" "People are going to think that you're some sort of meathead in that thing. That's not the appeal that I'm aiming for." "Appeal?" "That's right, appeal. Those associated with myself or the transportation network have an image to uphold." Lady Shultir started to pace around her, a look of extreme focus on her face. She felt her arm, then reached up and poked her shoulders. Ilishnish twitched in alarm when a hand pressed her belly, then another felt her ribs. "Don't move," Lady Shultir told her, "this is important." Ilishnish tried her best not to squirm as Lady Shultir's hands continued to roam around. Two hands grasped her buttocks and squeezed them several times, then Lady Shultir slapped them for some reason. Your proportions are weirdly perfect, but they're still very convincing." Lady Shultir circled to the front of Ilishnish again, eyeing her breasts. "Considering you're not actually wearing that uniform, do you keep your natural armor and damage reduction with this?" I think so," Ilishnish said. "Hitting me right now would almost be the same as hitting me as a dragon if that's what you mean." "Wait, don't hit me, please." Ilishnish raised her arms to cover as much as possible while bracing herself. One notable thing that didn't come across to her human self was the mass of a dragon, so if Lady Shultir hit her as hard as Ilishnish thought she was able to, she would end up in a field halfway to Kani village. After several moments of not being blasted out of the city, she peeked over her right arm at Lady Shultir. Rather than preparing to hit her, the vampire's brow was set with the same focus as before. Another thing, dance over to that wall and back." "Huh?" Lady Shultir crossed her arms with an expectant look, and Ilishnish let out a sigh as she complied. Oh. That's beautiful, sister. Ilishnish's nerves were too frayed to tell her brother to be quiet. Lady Shaltir frowned after a moment. It was nice, she said, but I didn't feel any effects from that. I just learned the basics recently, I haven't figured out any working dances yet. Well, you should keep at it, Lady Shaltir told her. MMH, I think I have just the thing for you. I'm going to make a call and pick up something from home, don't go anywhere. Lady Shaltir teleported away, and Ilishnish exchanged looks with Hedgenmill. What is she going to do to me, brother? I haven't a clue, sister, but can you do that dance again? Ilishnish glared at him, and Hedgenmill turned his attention back to his book. Several minutes later, Lady Shaltir popped up in front of them again. She took Ilishnish by the arm and dragged her into the broom closet on the opposite end of the hoardings. Several articles of clothing appeared over her arm. Ilishnish's nose was drawn to their extraordinary value. If you can imitate the uniform that Sabos is using for his dojo, Lady Shaltir said, you can do it for this as well, yes? What is this? Ilishnish replied, I've never seen anything like it before. The more Ilishnish looked at the garments, the more she wanted them. The only thing that kept her from trying to snatch them away was the fact that Lady Shaltir would probably react by burying her head first in the wall. This is an armor set called Fuyutsuki, Lady Shaltir told her. It's mid-level battle dancer equipment. I thought the design would suit you perfectly, so hurry up and start replacing that dreary outfit. This is complicated, Ilishnish's eyes traced over the intricate design of the items. Maybe I should just wear it? Dragons don't wear body armor, do they? Well, no. Then that would be pointless, Lady Shaltir told her. We're going purely for looks here, and it should be a fantastic fit. She picked up and studied each piece, trying to make sense out of the whole. There was an open-topped bodysuit that went down to the upper thigh, and a short-sleeved white shirt that hugged her figure in the same way. The bodysuit was a solid midnight blue up to the waist, where swirling wisps of icy white traced up to blend with the shirt. The shirt should be under the bodysuit, Lady Shaltir said. Actually, never mind, I'll just equip it and you'll see how it goes together. The black ballroom gown shimmered, replaced by the clothing she was presenting in her arms. Ilishnish blinked several times, trying to figure out what exactly had happened. I'm waiting. Lady Shaltir placed a hand on her hip. Ilishnish went back to adjusting her appearance. A short coat with long sleeves of diaphanous white gossamer went over the shirt, while a solid white half-cloak split into sections in the lower third was drawn over her right shoulder. Long white gloves with dark palms and fingers hugged her arms to the elbow. The edges of the lighter portions of her garb took on a frosty blue tinge as she adjusted the fine details to suit her tastes. Ilishnish held up a hand, flexing her fingers experimentally. Do your natural weapons work the same way as well? Lady Shaltir asked. I've never worn gloves before, but yes, they should. If I damage a claw, it should appear as a hole in these gloves or something along those lines. Oh, I see. Ilishnish suddenly realized the reason behind Lady Shaltir's question. Sabos asked me the same questions, and I didn't realize why until now. Ilishnish turned her attention away from her outfit to explain what she knew to Lady Shaltir. There are spells of the transmutation school in tier magic that allow the caster to alter or add to portions of their bodies, Ilishnish said, and might seem similar to what I am doing to take on my different appearances. There are also many races who can alter their appearance to various degrees through specific innate abilities. I am not using one of those abilities, however, and I am not casting magic, not in the sense that a tier magic caster casts magic. You're not? Lady Shaltir furrowed a brow. It's true that we frost dragons naturally begin to harness our innate spellcasting ability as we reach adulthood, but what I am employing to facilitate my various appearances is spellsong. Spellsongs are performed and require no mana. It is a bard's skill to manipulate the threads of magic inherent in our world through artistic expression. This alteration is a composition of my own making. I've never heard of any spellsong like that, Lady Shaltir said. The bards around here also appear to play the same ones I'm familiar with. This is something I've noticed as well, Ilishnish agreed. The literature from Fioburkana that I used as a reference to first learn how to perform spellsongs also suggests as much. There are several dozen spellsongs that appear to be common to all other bards I've observed so far. The very idea of one composing new spellsongs is entirely unheard of, and I'm uncertain why that is. Maybe they're just unskilled, while skilled bards keep their own development secret. That seems wise, Lady Shiltir nodded. So you're capable of performing spell songs as a bard, and innately casting tear magic as a dragon? Yes, my lady, Ilishnish replied. We dragons are something like the sorcerers when it comes to our innate casting ability. Upon reaching adulthood, frost dragons can cast first-tier magic. I haven't learned anything yet, however, as most of my studies have revolved around being a bard. Higher tiers of magic become available as we grow, but, unfortunately, there are various difficulties with learning tier magic. Most of my family just learns a few spells that they find useful and rely on physical strength instead. So you don't intend on learning any tier magic? Lady Shiltir asked. I imagine that I will at some point, my lady, Ilishnish answered. I'd just like to see what sort of magic is out there before spending the time to learn anything. I see. I should take note of all this. It appears to be quite a handy thing for the transportation network if we can have everyone learn certain spells. Anyways, you should complete your outfit. You need to get to the Adventurer Guild soon. The thigh-high stockings came next, of the same shade as the lower portion of her bodysuit. She furrowed her brow while trying to figure out the shoes. The heels are a single piece with the stockings, Lady Shiltir pointed out. Last came what appeared to be decorative bits, a dark collar, dark straps that she thought were supposed to support her form, intermittent silver lining that traced over her body, as if to suggest the glimmer of snow in the moonlight, or stars in the night sky. A pin with a pale white blossom was fixed on the left side of her hair, which fell in frosty blue waves down the center of her back. The same light fabric as her coat sleeves formed a flowing half-skirt that exposed her right leg and waist. Ilishnish studied her appearance as best as she could. Even after a brief glance, she grew enamored with it. The color scheme suited her tastes, and the flowing cloak and half-skirt left a sense of the wings and tail she lacked in human appearance. She turned and twisted and leaned in different ways to take it all in, making slight adjustments to streamline her look. I knew it would work. Lady Shiltir smiled as her black ballroom gown shimmered back into existence. Ilishnish adjusted the strap of her infinite haversack so it looped around her waist and the container rested on her left hip, over top of the skirt. She looked back at Lady Shiltir, who opened the door and waved her out. The customers at the front desk immediately turned their attention to her. Lady Shiltir peeked out from inside the broom closet to take note of the people watching Ilishnish. A figure further out along the wall stirred and approached her. Shiva? Lady Wagner peered at her as she came close. Hello, Lady Wagner, Ilishnish replied. Good morning, Lady Wagner. Lady Shiltir walked out from behind the door. Oh, good morning, Lady Shiltir. Lady Wagner lowered her head in a curtsy. I take it that this is what you called me here for? That's right, Lady Shiltir replied. I would like your professional opinion on her appearance. I'm scared of what will happen if she turns things up, Lady Wagner said. She's a dancer, right? If she uses her abilities. Walk halfway to the end and back, Lady Shiltir instructed Ilishnish. Make it look as good as possible, use your abilities, too. Ilishnish turned around, taking a deep breath. She entered her form of restoration and drew out all of the grace and charm she could muster. She took one step, then another, walking down the long corridor. Each step was in measure with her dancer's expression, weaving the enchantment that billowed out around her. Wistful sighs from the spectators filled the air. When she came back, everyone was openly staring at her, except for Lady Shiltir and her vampire brides. See, can I have her, my lady? Lady Wagner said. Any business I add her to will quintuple their profits. No, Lady Shiltir smiled lightly, but I can see how this can be dangerous. Only the undead, who are immune to mind-affecting abilities, were able to ignore her just now. She's so high-level compared to the average citizen that they wouldn't be able to resist. Yeah, Lady Wagner agreed. Even though the effect isn't inherently belligerent, the disruption caused is to the degree that it would qualify as a magical attack if it's not performed in an appropriate locale. It sure was amazing, though. This going to be the uniform for the vampire post? No, Lady Shiltir answered. I had something more formal in mind for the office workers. This outfit was what I had in mind for her specifically. She'll be wearing it when she's not on the job. When she's not on the job? Lady Wagner said with some confusion. She mentioned that she worked for you when we first met, but I couldn't figure out what she did. She's a delivery worker. I didn't know you've started going into land transport, my lady. Lady Wagner rubbed her chin. The local transport companies might start screaming about that. Shiver is air transport, actually. Lady Wagner looked at Elishnish, then back at Lady Schultier. Air transport? Yes, Lady Schultier nodded. She's a frost dragon. Elishnish and Lady Schultier watched Lady Wagner meander away in a stupor. After she disappeared down the stairs to the demi-human quarter, Lady Schultier brought Elishnish back into the broom closet again. She closed the door behind them, then looked over Elishnish with an elbow cradled in hand. Maybe that was a bit too successful, she muttered. Should I change back, my lady? Elishnish asked. What? Lady Schultier answered, no, the impact is great, you just have to control it. Just hold off on your abilities unless you need to use them. Frost dragons are ambush predators, doesn't that mean you're naturally stealthy too? I haven't seriously put it to the test as a human, Elishnish replied. Well, find out when you're on your way there, Lady Schultier said. Now, since you seem to have been trained to an acceptable degree, I'm entrusting you with some very important work. Important work? Me? That's right. Be on your very best behavior, you do know what I mean by that, yes? I'm not sure, my lady, maybe? Lady Schultier peered up at her with a frown. Do not break any laws, she told her, do not say or do anything that will bring shame upon His Majesty or myself. Do not spread any tales or rumors amongst the population. As my subordinate, your conduct reflects upon me. If you do anything inappropriate, you will not enjoy the consequences. Elishnish swallowed. She had developed a vague idea of what was appropriate and what wasn't, but it was always the things she didn't know about that got her in trouble. I don't know if I can do this, Elishnish said. What if I do something unintentionally? If you feel that it will be a problem, then keep quiet, be polite, and cooperate with Mayor Gur. This would be much easier if Ludmilla was available. Who is that? Elishnish. A vassal of mine, Lady Schultier answered. She's also an adventurer, so she'd be able to show you around as her junior, and ensure your conduct is appropriate. Unfortunately, she's seeing to important duties in her territory at the moment. Lady Schultier reached into a strange hole in front of her, withdrawing a pair of items. Since she's not available, she said, you'll just have to make do on your own. Take these. Elishnish looked down at the midnight blue notepad and pen held out to her. The notepad was plain, but the pen seemed valuable. What's this for? Can you write? I'm good at dwarf, at least the language of the ones that live in the Azalizia range. There's Draconic, also I've learned a bit of the local language. Good, keep learning, Lady Schultier said. This is to help you keep track of things. Anything you think you'll have trouble remembering, just write it down in here. It would help, as Lady Schultier said. As her experiences and knowledge expanded, she would need to rely on it less and less, as the right connections would more often than not be made, but she should always run into something new once in a while. She tested the pen, watching the black ink flow smoothly onto paper. Lady Schultier. I thought you were angry at me. I will be angry at you if I have reason to be, just like with any of my subordinates. Since I have you within arm's reach, is there something you'd like to inform me about so we can get it over with? No, my lady, Elishnish tensed. I just thought you hated me for some reason. Hate? Lady Schultier furrowed her brow. You're mistaking me for some other undead race, I think. I have neither the time, energy nor care to hate perpetually for such unimportant incidents. I reserve my true ire for His Majesty's enemies. If you do something you should not be doing, then you will be punished. Since I enjoy that sort of thing, I will make you suffer in interesting ways if I can. If you wish to avoid this, then avoid committing any conduct that requires punishment. Simple, no? I feel like punishments are inevitable, the way things are going. Well, that's just how it is, Lady Schultier told her. Service to His Majesty demands perfection, but everyone eventually makes mistakes. We are fortunate that, in His mercy, He only asks that we learn from them so we may improve ourselves, but it is still proper to offer recompense. Now, get going, Mayor should have long arrived by now. Elishnish concealed herself and left the broom closet, sneaking past the queue of customers at the front desk. She made her way along the wall until she reached the southern gatehouse, pondering how she would proceed. In the end, she decided to leap across the busy street to the rooftops. Looking around herself, it appeared that no one had noticed, or cared, not even the elder liches patrolling over the city. She dropped down into the alleys, taking the shortest route to the main plaza. Elishnish fretted in the shade of a tree standing across the way from the Adventurer Guild. The pleasant mood that came with her new garb and the new insight on Lady Schultier's actions faded away and, no matter how much she tried to calm herself, her nerves grew more ragged with every breath. Adventurers. Mysterious beings who sometimes appeared on the administrative ledgers in Fiobacana. Accompanying their entries was always some mark of dead violence, tribes exterminated, monsters slain, long lists of materials brought in from their merciless massacres. It didn't matter whether one was innocent or not, adventurers were always willing to hunt you down, for a prize. As a dragon, Elishnish was keenly aware that her kind was hunted for trophies and materials. Hides, meat, horns and other parts of the frost dragons who lived in the same area were often on those lists, commanding a high price, so it was always a risk that adventurers would come after her for her body. According to her mother, the local adventurers were especially on the lookout for higher quality equipment, though they all seemed to have a perpetual hunger for this, so an innocent frost dragon like Elishnish would be an irresistible target if they caught her in a vulnerable position. Zushiru also mentioned that they wouldn't die even when they were killed, like some relentless undead horror that kept rising from the grave no matter how many times it was put down. Elishnish reviewed her options for what would most undoubtedly be the most dangerous trial in her all-too-brief life. She had the letter from Master Tian. It was a simple note that marked her as one of the Justice Dragon Dojo's students, so its role in ensuring her safety would be entirely contingent on his reputation, which appeared flimsy, at best. There was also a certain mayor, who she assumed was the dark elf of the same name who sometimes came to the demi-human quarter. Establishing contact with him appeared to be the most direct method of gaining protection. If it came down to it, she might also be able to leverage the fact that she worked for Lady Schultier. 3 lifelines, 3 chances to stave off a grisly fate if things should go awry and the adventurers detected the presence of crafting materials in their midst. She took several deep breaths, then scanned her surroundings before sneaking up to the door. Should she knock? No one had come in or out of the building in her memory, so she wasn't sure what the correct procedure was. She couldn't find any sort of chain to pull for a bell, so she knocked lightly, just in case. This was supposedly the polite thing to do in this city. No one answered. Maybe she could go back now? If no one was home, then it couldn't be helped, right? To her dismay, vibrations came from the other side of the door while she was considering retreat, the steady sound of footfalls coming ever closer. I don't think it's locked, Ishpan. A muffled voice came from the other side, and the door opened a crack. Elishnish swallowed, taking a few steps back. Yep, it's not locked. The door opened the rest of the way, and a human female looked up at her, eyes growing wide. Oh. The woman spun on her heel and hastily withdrew into the depths of the building. Ishpan, BB big catch. We got a big one. Elishnish steadied herself against the doorframe, feeling faint. A second set of steps joined the first, rapidly approaching the entrance. A big one? A second voice said, what do you mean, oh? A second human female appeared, followed by the first. Her lips formed into an ingratiating smile. Welcome to the Adventurer Guild, she said. There's no need to knock, please, come in. The 2 women coaxed her into the building, leading her around the stairs inside to a broad counter. Elishnish looked around nervously, trying to examine everything at once. The 2 leading her were the only others she could sense so far, which made her nervous over what powerful beings were hidden from her notice. So, what brings you to the Adventurer Guild, Miss? Shiva, Elishnish replied in a small voice. Miss Shiva? The smile plastered to her face did not fade. Then, have you come to register? What was she supposed to be doing here, anyway? Something about representing both Lady Schultier, the Justice Dragon Dojo, and finding Mare. She needed to be quiet and polite to maximize her safety. She retrieved Master Tian's letter from her infinite haversack, placing it on the counter with a trembling hand. The woman across from her, Ishpan, she assumed, unfolded it and read over the content. It says that she's from a new school for monks in the city, Ishpan told the other woman. Does it mean that they're trying to use the Adventurer Guild to market themselves? That's, The other women paused in thought, I guess there aren't any rules about that. It's happened in the past several times, at least. Ishpin turned her attention back to Elishnish. So Shiva is fine?
Yes.
And you're representing this Justice Dragon dojo, she muttered as she wrote something down behind the counter.
And Lady Shiltia, Elishnish added.
Ishpin looked up at her with a frown, and Elishnish took a half step back. Did she say something wrong? Isn't Lady Shiltia Ludmilla's liege?
The other woman asked.
She is, Ishpin nodded. As I recall,
Ludmilla was sent here by Lady Shiltia, too.
Then which one is it?
She can't be under both, can she?
Rather than helping to ensure her safety, the information only left the two humans confused. Elishnish panicked and desperately played her final card. I'm supposed to see someone by the name of Mare, too.
The two women turned their heads to look at one another.
Is he still in the back? Ishpin asked.
I served him tea about half an hour ago. The other woman answered.
Go ahead and let him know, Winner,
Ishpin said.
I'll get this done quick. Winner left the desk, ducking through a curtained frame leading into a back hallway. Elishnish's brief sense of reprieve was pushed aside as Ishpin continued with her questions. So, what do you do, Shiva?
I'm a bard, Elishnish replied.
Well, I guess that figures, going by your outfit. What sort of bard are you? I'm training to become a dancer.
A dancer?
Ishpin raised her eyebrows. That's pretty rare. Most of them work as members of theater troupes or as private contractors. Anyways, it's not something you usually find in any adventurer guild. Is there any particular reason for that?
Elishnish asked.
I guess you could say it's difficult to make work, Ishpin said. Be it for the dancer or their party. Now, if you'll... A shadow appeared in the back hallway, and a dark elf appeared, accompanied by Winner. Mare rubbed his eyes as he walked out, yawning widely.
Are you the one Shiltia sent? He asked.
Yes, that's right. Elishnish nodded energetically. Was she safe now? She examined Mare carefully. She had only ever seen him from a distance. She couldn't gauge his strength, which she supposed shouldn't be a surprise at this point. His garments smelled exquisite. It was the richest scent she had ever experienced. Her gaze wandered over his panoply of astounding equipment until a certain detail raised alarms in her head. It couldn't be, could it? Mare.
Why yes?
Your shirt, what is it made out of?
This?
He looked down and pulled lightly on the deep blue leather. It's dragon scale.
No.
With a cry born of sheer terror, Elishnish turned to flee. Lady Shiltia had betrayed her. Swear must have gotten to her too, or maybe they were in league with one another from the start. Elishnish thought that maybe, just maybe, she and Lady Shiltia had started to get along a little bit, but it was all some sick game to them. Maybe she thought it an interesting way to suffer? It was mentioned in passing. Elishnish had been wrapped up in fancy packaging and delivered as a gift to the Adventurer Guild. Where are you going? Mare's voice said from behind her. Elishnish looked back. The dark elf had grabbed her wrist. She pulled as hard as she could, but he wouldn't budge. Not again. It always started like this. No, this was probably the end for her. She whimpered as she pulled in vain. Some new and unpleasant sequence of events was surely imminent. The door to the Adventurer Guild opened, and a pair of shadows stretched past the stairs. Mare, a girl's voice called, "What's taking so long? It's been over 30 minutes already." Two female elves walked round the corner, furrowing their brows at the scene. The taller of the two was fairly strong, though still comfortably below Elishnish. The shorter one was the same size as Mare, sharing many similarities, including the appearance and value of their equipment. Her eyes threatened to roll out of their sockets when she saw the shirt of red scales. Hi. She turned around and darted to Mare, throwing her arms around her only hope. Lord Mare's muffled voice rose from her chest. The two female elves' expressions turned aghast, mouths falling open. The shorter of the two pointed a finger at her. What are you doing to my little brother? The taller elf female sprung into action, leaping forward and grabbing Elishnish around the waist. Unhand Lord Mare, you skank, she yelled as she pulled, HNNNNG. She won't budge, Lady Aura, she's in the realm of heroes. Mare. What are you doing? Don't let her rub herself all over you like that. Be but big sis. Don't butt me.
Lady Aura said, "Out of the way, Mary, I'll handle this."
The arms around Ilishnish's waist released themselves, and she stepped around Lord Mayor, putting him between herself and the advancing Lady Aura. Wait, you're Lady Aura? Huh? The dark elf scowled at her. What about it? Please make me your pet. A look of disgust flickered over Lady Aura's face, replaced by a vehement glare.
"Mayor," she said in a deadly calm voice.
"Big sis? Move out of the way, I'm getting rid of this dangerous woman." Ilishnish's knees buckled, and she hung off of Lord Mayor's shoulders weakly.
Wait! Lord Mayor exclaimed. "She's here to help us. Why are you trying to get rid of her?"
"She is?"
Lady Aura didn't look convinced at all.
"She is."
Lord Mayor nodded.
"I am?" Ilishnish had no idea what she was supposed to be doing. An exquisite bow materialized in Lady Aura's hand. I am." Ilishnish ducked behind Lord Mayor's shoulder. "I'm here to cooperate." She was sent by Shiltir to help with some things. Lord Mayor explained. I don't know what happened, but she's trembling so much, she's so scared that she's making me scared." "She's the one that Shiltir sent?" Lady Aura's voice turned incredulous. "That idiot." "Hey. How long are you going to hang off of my brother for?" Ilishnish looked over at Lady Aura fearfully. She still looked quite cross, and Ilishnish let out a helpless whimper. "I'm scared, my lord." Despite her admission of fear, the two other elves bristled at her words. What did they want from her? Everything she did made them angry. The door to the building opened again, and a human male appeared. Much like the two elves, he stopped and furrowed his brow as he came around the corner, bushy mustache stirring as he spoke. "What the hell is going on here?" "Shiltir sent her to help out, Mr. Reinsack," Lord Mayor replied. "She did?" Mr. Reinsack's expression did not change. "I'm not sure if we need this kind of help. Why is she clinging to you like that?" A few things happened?" Ilishnish felt a light touch on her forearm. Lord Mayor peeled her off, despite her clinging onto him with all her might. She felt his hand squeeze hers lightly, and she felt some small comfort through his grip. "Don't be afraid," Lord Mayor said. "We'll head to the back, and I can explain everything there, okay?"